There is a version of your future that already exists, not in some mystical way, not because fate decided it, because every decision you make today is quietly building a person you'll eventually become. The strange part is that most people don't notice they're building that future until they're living inside it. At 40 years old, Daniel sat alone in his driveway. The house was bigger than the one he grew up in. The car was newer than anything his parents ever owned. His neighbors considered him successful. Yet every morning he woke up with the same feeling, a feeling that something had slipped through his fingers. Not money, time. And nobody warns you about this part, because by the time you realize you've spent 20 years climbing the wrong mountain, you're already standing at the top, looking around, wondering why the view feels so empty. But Daniel's story doesn't begin at 40. It begins at 22. And it begins with a conversation most families never have, a conversation rich families have all the time without realizing how much it changes everything. And that's where this story starts. At 22, Daniel believed what almost everyone around him believed. Get a degree, get a good job, work hard, stay out of trouble. Everything else would take care of itself. Simple, reasonable, completely incomplete. His first paycheck felt magical. The number wasn't huge, but it felt like proof that he had escaped the uncertainty he watched his parents fight their entire lives. The first thing he did was celebrate. The second thing he did was upgrade his life. A better apartment, a newer car, more dinners out, more convenience, more rewards. Nothing dramatic, nothing reckless, just enough spending to make himself feel like all the years of sacrifice had finally paid off. And at first, it worked. He felt successful. But that's not the worst part. The worst part was that everybody applauded. Friends congratulated him. Co-workers encouraged him. Social media rewarded him. Everything around him reinforced the idea that consumption was success. Nobody asked a different question. Nobody asked, "What are you building?" Around the same time, another 22-year-old named Sarah graduated from college. Sarah wasn't smarter than Daniel. She wasn't more talented. She didn't work harder. But she grew up hearing different conversations. At dinner, her parents discussed investments. They discussed ownership. They discussed businesses. Not because they were billionaires, because they understood something most people never learn. Income can make you comfortable. Ownership can make you free. The difference sounds small until 20 years pass. Sarah's first paycheck arrived. She celebrated too. Then she did something strange. She bought nothing. Not immediately. Instead, she purchased shares of businesses she would never work for. Tiny pieces, small amounts, nothing impressive, but something important happened. She wasn't spending money anymore. She was recruiting money. And that single shift changed the direction of her life. You don't notice it at first. That's the dangerous thing. The consequences of money decisions arrive very slowly, like a crack forming in a foundation, invisible for years, then impossible to ignore. At 25, Daniel was earning more than ever. Promotions, raises, bonuses. His lifestyle expanded perfectly alongside his income. Every increase disappeared. A nicer apartment, a nicer vacation, a nicer version of everything. The strange thing was that he never felt richer. Every year he earned more, every year he felt almost exactly the same. Because lifestyle inflation is a magician. It convinces you that progress happened while quietly stealing the evidence. Meanwhile, Sarah's life looked less impressive. Smaller apartment, older car, fewer luxury purchases. People occasionally wondered if she was struggling. She wasn't. She was buying something invisible. Time. And nobody could see it yet. By 28, something unexpected happened. Daniel began comparing himself to people ahead of him. Not because he wanted to, because that's what humans do. Someone bought a better house. Someone started a company. Someone retired early. Someone traveled the world. Social comparison quietly entered every room, and suddenly the life that once felt successful started feeling insufficient. This is the trap nobody explains.
Success is often measured relative to the people around you, which means the finish line keeps moving. You arrive, then it moves. You arrive again, then it moves again. Years can disappear chasing a finish line designed to stay out of reach. And this is where most people make the mistake. They think the solution is earning more. It rarely is. The real solution is needing less validation from people who aren't living your life. At 30, the economy changed. Companies started cutting costs. Rumors spread through Daniel's office. Layoffs, restructuring, budget reductions. For the first time in years, fear appeared. Not panic, fear. The realization that his entire financial world depended on a single paycheck. One employer, one decision made in a boardroom he'd never enter, one email, and everything could change. Suddenly the car payment felt heavier, the mortgage felt heavier, the lifestyle felt heavier. Nothing had changed, yet everything felt different, because dependence has a weight, and most people don't feel it until uncertainty arrives. Meanwhile, Sarah had quietly built something else. Not wealth, not yet. Options, investment accounts, side income, skills that could generate money independent of an employer. The difference wasn't visible from the outside, but internally, the difference was enormous. Fear behaves differently when you have alternatives. Then, life delivered something nobody plans for. Daniel's father got sick. The kind of sickness that changes family conversations overnight. Hospitals, appointments, decisions, stress. Time became more valuable than money. But Daniel had spent years optimizing for income instead of freedom. So every day away from work carried a cost. Every week felt expensive. Every choice felt constrained. And that's when a painful realization arrived. Money isn't valuable because of what it buys. Money is valuable because of what it allows you to choose. And choices become priceless when life becomes difficult. Nobody learns this lesson from a finance book. Life teaches it personally. At 35, Daniel looked successful from the outside. But internally, exhaustion had started accumulating. Not because he hated his life, because he had accidentally built a life that required constant maintenance. The house required income, the lifestyle required income, the identity required income. Everything depended on continuous performance. He wasn't wealthy, he was expensive, and there is a difference. Meanwhile, Sarah had crossed a strange threshold. Her investments generated enough income to cover some expenses, then more expenses, then even more. At first, it seemed insignificant. Then, one day, she noticed something remarkable. Her money was working harder than she was. That sentence sounds ordinary until it becomes real. Then it changes everything. What happened next changed both lives. At 38, Daniel received the promotion he'd wanted for years. The title, the salary, the recognition, the thing he'd imagined would finally make him feel secure. For a few months it worked. Then the feeling faded, just like every achievement before it. Because goals are often emotional promises disguised as financial targets. We think reaching them will permanently change how we feel. Most don't. The excitement expires, the baseline returns, the chase begins again. And years later, the bill finally arrives. The bill isn't financial, it's emotional. It's the realization that you've spent decades pursuing comfort while accidentally sacrificing freedom. At 40, Daniel sat in that driveway, the same driveway where this story began, and he started asking different questions. Not how much do I have, but how much do I need? Not how successful do I look, but how free am I? Not what did I earn, but what did it cost me? And for the first time, he saw the hidden equation. Every dollar spent carries a future cost. Every dollar invested carries a future benefit.
the difference compounds, not just financially, emotionally, psychologically, existentially. One path buys status, the other buys choices. Most people discover this far too late. Now imagine another version of your life, a parallel timeline. Same intelligence, same background, same opportunities, only one difference. At 22, someone teaches you a few simple rules. Buy assets before liabilities. Invest before upgrading your lifestyle. Learn how money compounds. Build multiple income streams. Treat financial education as a lifelong skill.
Talk about money without shame. Understand that freedom is the goal, not appearances. The changes would feel tiny, almost disappointing. You wouldn't feel rich. You wouldn't look rich. Most years would appear boring. But then 10 years pass, then 20, and suddenly your future looks completely different. Not because of one dramatic decision, because of thousands of invisible ones. That's how wealth is actually built, quietly, patiently, almost invisibly, until one day the results become impossible to ignore. The richest lesson wealthy families teach isn't investing, it isn't taxes, it isn't business, it's identity. They teach their children something subtle, something powerful. They teach them that wealth is normal, that ownership is normal, that investing is normal, that building assets is normal. And what feels normal eventually becomes behavior. Behavior becomes habits. Habits become outcomes. Outcomes become lives. Most people were never given that belief, not because their parents failed, because their parents never received it either. Generations pass information, and they also pass silence. Sometimes what changes a family's future isn't money. It's one conversation, one lesson, one person deciding the pattern stops here. Maybe that's you. Maybe you're the first person in your family learning these rules. Maybe you're the first person questioning them. Maybe you're the first person building something different. And if that's true, understand something important. The goal was never to become rich. The goal was never the car, the house, the status, the applause. The goal was always something quieter, something harder to notice. The ability to wake up one day and realize your choices belong to you. Because the truth is, wealth was never really about money. It was about buying back time before life decided how to spend it for you. And by the time most people understand that, time has already made its decision.